where do I get my ideas from? Well, if he's talking about ideas that the previous devs have made, I'm not responsible for those, and so I don't know what they got those ideas. So I'm not going to take credit for that because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. They're the ones who started the mod, and I'm just modifying the mod. What my future ideas are coming from, I borrow them from a lot of real-time strategy games I've played. So, for example, the idea of asymmetric balance, the ideas of economic balance, the ideas of all these things, they come from general RTS principles. So Age of Empires 2, StarCraft, Company 1 to some extent, all sorts of RTS games that I've played, and I incorporate a lot of their balancing ideas because a lot of games, you can try cheeses, but they will have consequences, or you can try other thing, or you can try to play the meta, or they'll have a different meta, and you'll have counters to everything. There are always some kind of counter, and that's the kind of thing I get my ideas from. Other RTS games have proven themselves to be well designed, well thought out, well made in the past, and that is the principal inspiration for a lot of my potential and future ideas.
Right. Okay. Now it's time for the question of Eugene. As we
Yes.
all know, the Ranger Doctrine from USF is probably the best doctrine in the mod at the moment. How will it be changed? Will the Faustzug be removed, the long term? Because at the moment it contradicts all what the system doctrine stands for.
Right. So as Eugene mentions, it contradicts what the doctrine system stands for. And what I think he means by this is that you can just pick Ranger, and it's a catch-all. It suits every situation. If you don't know what to pick, just pick Ranger. You can't go wrong picking Ranger because it has all the tools you need. And this is part of my principal design philosophies, which is that I don't like the idea of overly versatile doctrines. You don't need to think; you just pick the best one. And that's not what I think doctrines are for. And I think Eugene also agrees. So how will be changed? Well, Faustic will be nerfed a little bit. The long tom, well, I'm not sure exactly how to nerf the long tom yet. All the 150 and higher artillery pieces will have to be nerfed because we've experienced in the past when you add that artillery piece to a doctrine, the doctrine becomes OP, which means that the doctrine itself may not be the issue. It's that unit, a specific unit, is OP. It doesn't have a counter, or it's too cost effective. I would have to rework all of the big artillery pieces to be balanced. And after I make that change, perhaps Ranger won't be as overpowered as it is right now because maybe the long tom won't be as amazing an artillery piece. We don't know that yet. I don't know that yet because I haven't figured that out. But it's not just Ranger doctrine; it's all the doctrines that are too versatile. I already nerfed infantry a little bit, but it's not just that. But we can get to that.
Next question. Is there a plan to change or rework the battle group system, reduce cooldown or make the units buildable, or add or change battle group squads or of sergeant dogs like Sturm? Squads that are kind of boring, like the cavalry from Sturm,
Yeah,
to
so this is a
something more
common
exciting?
question. How can we work battle groups? How do they even work? And my answer to that is I do like the idea of just being able to train battle group units because the current system is really weird. Like you can't get the units you want unless you have a bunch of other units with them. So sometimes you get units you don't really need or really want in the first place, just because you get them with the battle group for that other unit you wanted. And it's like, well, I'm not sure how to work with this yet. I do have plans to look into it, but that's kind of low priority thing. Whether or not I'm going to add new units, that's a distant thing.
Next, the M10 Wolverine has a problem that it gets main gun loaded killed 90% of the time. It gets shots in my experience. Is this intended?
I believe so. Yes, it is intended because it is an open top tank, and it's definitely one of those weaker points, which means that M10s may get buffed in the future to be a little cheaper because you can pen it once and it's useless. So there are some reworks planned for the M10, and by extension, the M36 Jackson as well has a similar problem. You pen it once, his main gun gets killed. So these tanks probably need some reworking, probably some cost buffs, but I'm not sure yet. But those are simple changes. I might just roll them into a patch at some point or another.
Will smoke on retreat be removed?
On Odon, I thought about it for a long time, and I think yes. I think I will remove it from Odon.
And from other doctrines, I think some units get them like commandos,
Yeah,
UKF
it's
commandos.
it's it's available on a lot of random units. Like you can upgrade on your medics, for example. You can upgrade it on a lot of random units across the Spearhead unit repertoire. And I'm not going to remove it from every single one, just on the most problematic ones. Right now, the most problematic unit is Odon because they're too versatile. So I'm going to target them first.
Okay. Knowing how powerful artillery is at the moment, is there a chance defensive structures like pillboxes and trenches get a buff?
That will come as a future thing. There is definitely a case to be made for the decreased the received damage modifier on bunkers right now. They're a bit too low. You get one shot by a Sherman, which is not intentional. But in general, I would rather nerf the artillery than buff the defensive structures. But if after nerfing the artillery, it is still too weak to build bunkers and pillboxes, then and only then will I tweak the buffing of the pillboxes until they're in a kind of a sweet spot where they're not useless, but they're not unkillable.
How will shock and Odon be balanced out?
So these two things are these two doctrines are too versatile. So Odon, their primary unit, the Odon squad, will be nerfed in many different ways. Like, for example, I will be removing the crawling ability for Odon. You can't crawl around anymore. You can still plant landmines, but you can't crawl. You can't have smoke and retreat. And I may limit the RPD to be like CP or like Vet 1 or something. Maybe like there's a lot of possibilities for nerfing Odon in such a way that they're still useful, but not gods anymore. I'm not going to add a cap to them though, because you don't have a cap on Shock. You don't have a cap on Odon. They're really not, they're not amazing if you account for the nerfs that follow.
Okay.
And on Shock, I think Shock have been nerfed a lot. Like after the price nerf, you can't spam Shock infantry anymore because how expensive they are, and I don't think they're that OP anymore in terms of infantry. But they do have very powerful tanks. So the T-85, I've been contemplating removing it and strictly having Shock serve as a anti-infantry style doctrine instead of an all-rounder doctrine. And of course, as mentioned before, the 152 needs to be nerfed because those are too powerful. So once that gets nerfed, maybe Shock won't be too overpowerful after all. We'll have to see.
All right. Will all officer tanks be changed from call-ins into buildable units like for Leichter or infantry?
I'd like to do that. I don't know if there's enough slots for it though, but if I can, I'll try to. I'd like to do that because right now, as we know, they are too powerful. Because take for example the Panzer Lux, the Panzer Command tank, the Panzer II pops out at CP3 and instantly just wipes everything on the field. And you have no counter, and because it doesn't take any time, there's no counter to calling it in. There's very little drawback in calling in, so you just call it and boom, you're making money. So it's like, yeah, there needs to be a drawback of some kind. Maybe it'll take time to call in. Maybe it'll take like something like that. Because like I'm debating whether or not I want to build it or have it take time to call in. Because if it takes time to call in, you can't cancel it. So that is something that is an interesting idea. Like you can't cancel the call of an officer once you call it in. You're set in stone. But you would also oh hello Scully. You could also build them. You could build them, but you can cancel them. So it's like you want to have delays. You can't. You should not be able to do anything instantly. Like reacting to stuff is something I don't like in general. Like instance, you should not be able to instantly get out of a sticky situation by just pressing a button and poof, you have a counter. That shouldn't be the case. You should always have preparations for it, and officer tanks will be part of that thing.
All right. Next question. Will sector artillery be removed? And can you explain the officer abilities rework, not being anymore able to just rush him to the front, call RT, and come back?
Right. So sector artillery definitely would have to be removed. I think I'll probably just have a big circle instead because you can leave a circle. Sometimes the sectors are too big, so that's map dependent. And anything that's map dependent is probably not ideal, like in terms of map layout. Officer abilities right now, as we all know, you rush into the front, you call the RD, and you retreat, or you call two RDs and retreat, or whatever. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that you have to have an officer there for like a couple seconds. So you have your officer there, they sit there, and you have to have them there for like 5 seconds to call the small artillery, or 5 or 10 seconds, and maybe 15 seconds to call the big artillery. And only after you finish calling them will the thing actually fall. If you kill the officer while they're sitting there calling the artillery, then the artillery gets canceled. So you can't just instantly rush them in, pop that instant artillery ability, force the enemy to retreat, and run away. You can't do that because that is, like I said, I don't like instants. So that's definitely part of the rework. And I think rolled into this explanation, how will fire for effect be changed? I think everyone wants to hear the answer to that one. Well, fire for effect, what I would like to do, as it makes it, you have to have the officer there for the entire duration of the ability. If the officer moves, like you can't move him at all. If he moves at all, the ability gets canceled. So if an enemy vehicle comes up and pushes him, the ability gets canceled. So you have to keep the officer static and stationary and sitting there in order for the ability to be used. I think that would be a big nerf because you still need to have line of sight. You still need to be there, and you still have to have the call-in delay, and you have to have the officer there in the front line to call it. So it'd be much more risky. And I think that would greatly improve it. Also have the delay increased, so you wouldn't have things like that super fast Soviet tank destroyer fire for effect 76mm artillery barrage thing.
Okay. Is there a plan to reduce the time on the battle phase 2 from the Vermont as it's incredibly long?
No, I don't have plans for that.
Right. Will the Belarusian get the same treatment as Volkssturm civilian skill, for example?
Yes, all partisans in the game will eventually get the same treatment as Volkssturm. I just addressed Volkssturm first because they're used the most.
All right. Will the force damage be increased since at the moment it's weird and not exact and very random?
Oh yeah, I already have plans for that. I'm going to increase his damage floor, and same with the damage floor of the Panzer Schreck. So both Panzer Schreck and Panzerfaust will receive a slight buff after there's big nerf.
Okay. Will the Valonian squad STGs be locked behind veterancy?
This is a hard question because the principal thing behind Sturm is they get all these STGs, and if you remove the STGs, what do Sturm get? And the Wallonians locking the STG behind Vet, I don't think is the right way to do it. I don't think so because you were basically making them identical to Panzerjäger. Now you have two doctrines that both have 240 manpower infantry units that have Panzerfausts and can get STGs, and they're both locked behind Vet. And I don't think that's the right way to do it. I think a better way to handle it for Sturm specifically is to maybe either lock their STG behind CPs, so you can't instantly pop that munitions blitz and get your STGs out. You have to wait a little bit, and that would really reduce the efficacy and make it they're easier to counter later. Or lock the entire unit behind CP1. But I thought about that a long time, and I'm like, maybe not. I'll have to see on the CP locking. But there's definitely going to be some changes for the STG. I just don't know exactly how it's to be done yet.
Is there a plan to remove the buff stacking abilities?
Oh, side thing, just Scully here. Yeah, Sturm's gimmick is that they have STGs. Panzerjägers get them on a lot of mainline units, but it's not nearly as numerous. But yeah, going on. Buff stacking abilities, yes, definitely want to remove them. Buff stacking is a big problem. It's very easy to do because you just press the button and instantly get buffs. And I want to make it that, like I was saying earlier, in response to Ralph's question, how will they be balanced? Well, they should all have drawbacks. You can't just pop a buff and just profit, and the enemy can't counter it. There always has to be something that counters it, or something that has a drawback. So, take for example, the Iron Will ability, for example, or better yet, Fire Superiority. Fire Superiority, you get suppression on all these units that it fires at. You don't really have ability to counter it as Axis unless you have Suppression Break, which you don't always have the ability to get unless you're like late game SS. So oftentimes it's not counterable. So how do you remove that? Well, one easy way to do it is like Fire Superiority. You make so that the units are immobile; they can't move at all. For example, among other things, like there are a whole lot of ways you can balance buff stacking. But buff stacking, I don't plan to remove them. I plan to buff and to balance them out so that if let's say you buff stack a whole bunch of accuracy increase abilities on your units, well, all of a sudden your units are just as easily shot. For example, among other things.
Next question. Will the fuel drop and ammo drop be changed? Since I've heard many people wanting to change, so both drop either come at base or on sectors.
Yeah, so allied fuel drops tend to come at base, while Axis fuel drops tend to come at sectors, and people would want to, they want to have their drops come in a unified fashion. And I didn't really like this idea of unifying them because you start homogenizing the factions, they start feeling the same. So instead, I would have it so that Axis can get more resources by being at sectors, but it's risky because you're at a sector. While allies get less because you're at base, but you're safer because you're at base. I think that already is the case, but I'll look into it further and determine how much tweaking it needs to be done. But I don't really want to change the dynamic here.
Will armor racks be removed since they are very common and out of control of the player?
This is the big question. Will I remove ammo racks? The 5% chance for any tank to explode on penetration. The current answer is no, because I plan to rework armor entirely in the future. So until I rework armor, this is gonna stay because I don't see a pressing need to remove this. Like it's not like they changed the balance anyway. All tanks have the equal chance of getting ammo racked. I know Axis get affected by it more likely because your tanks are more expensive in general, but it's not like it's not a huge priority to remove this. I'd have to remove it from like every single tank and light gun in the game, which is a lot of removing. So I don't really want to do that yet.
Okay. Next, will the Kettenhund be nerfed?
Will it be nerfed? Right now they have a big aura for their straff, but I don't see how I can nerf them without making them useless. I guess I can make them elite. They do need to be nerfed because they are really strong. I think the biggest way to nerf them is get rid of their scope DMR. But I think I'll just say yes. I will try to nerf them. I don't know how yet.
I don't think they get scoped weapons.
They used to. They may not anymore.
Yeah, they get like automatic weapons,
Yeah, they get
STGs,
STGs.
MP40Is, or MG.
Yeah. So I'll figure out how Kettenhunters should be nerfed. Maybe even just like make them like regular infantry but increase their squad size because they're just military police after all. I'll have to figure that one out.
Are the Sextons gonna be moved to higher CP or being removed from certain British doctrines?
Oh yes, the Sexton. I'm probably going to look into it at some point to figure out why it's so powerful. I think it's maybe possible that its main gun has a bigger damage radius than the standard 105. That's the first thing I'll look into. Aside from that, I will increase its CP count. I will make it more expensive, and I will increase its cooldown, so it'll be harder to use in general. So I won't remove it. I won't change its caps, but I'm definitely going to make it less powerful, less effective.
Is there a chance that hammer and anvil system makes its way to Axis since it would benefit from it 10 times more since more units?
Oh, absolutely not. That is not something I want to introduce. The hammer and anvil system is really opaque and hard to wrap people's heads around. And it's like, why anvil? What do anvil get? What do hammer get? And it's like you have double the number of things, and that is one of the downsides of it. You have a lot more stuff, and it's more confusing. So no, I don't think I will do that.
Will there be a Spearhead free?
If there is a Company of Heroes 3.
How will the USF tank destroyer dog be changed?
First things first, gonna buff this Jackson a little bit somehow, maybe reduce his cost or something, because the primary problem is that if you get penned, you get your gun killed. So that is a big nerf or a big problem. Other than that, I'm going to change the nature of tank destroyer for USF. So right now, most doctrines for US have a niche. So Rangers are just good infantry, airborne the same thing, but more focused on air stuff. Armor is armor, rifles cheap crappy infantry. Mech is actually mech might be changed too, but tank destroyer doesn't have a niche. It's just random crappy buckets, and they don't really do a whole lot. So what I'm going to do for tank destroyer is try to figure out, maybe add some new weapons to them. So the big one I've been floating around a lot is things like shotguns. So they become like close quarters combat gods, and they've been really good at close quarters combat. and then maybe like perhaps even give them free bazookas on their infantry or something. Like give them some really distinct thing that makes them truly stand out as the anti-tank solution, while also at the same time being completely useless against massive numbers of infantry and massive defensive fortifications. So they're really specialized. So that's one thing I have planned for them, but that is a rework that will be done in the future.
Will the Calliope be nerfed?
Yes, in the same way that all other rocket artillery in the game and artillery in general in the game will be nerfed, I will be increasing or decreasing the penetration. So all rocket artillery should not be able to penetrate things so reliably and wipe out tanks like they do. And so the Calliope will be no different, and its scatter will be increased. So you will have a much wider scatter on this Calliope with much less penetration on the Calliope. So you basically have more anti-infantry effectiveness, but basically no anti-tank. So you can finally use your King Tigers without fear of being Calliope into nothing in an instant.
Will the UKF and static emplacements be buffed and moved to anvil only?
That is an interesting idea. Maybe. I don't know, but that I like that idea.
Will the Fallschirmjägers come from the get-go, or will they remain at command points too?
I think a good way to balance this, because a lot of people complain about this in the past. It's like, why are function makers come so late? And if they come too early, well, why are they? They're too powerful. And the big reason they're too powerful is that if you get them at CP0, you can get the scoped Fallschirmjäger, which is way too strong for CP0. So I'll probably cap their special weapons at CP2 or CP4 or whatever, but probably unlock it so that you can build them at CP0. So you can have infantry in the field, you just can't get their super powerful upgrades. And I think that's probably a happy medium.
All right. And we're done with Eugene's question. Now we're going to Fortune. When in development time you're thinking of working on the tank combat rework?
Okay, so I mentioned that I would like to have 1.3 before doing the community patch, and I would like to think that I will be putting the tank combat stuff after the community patch, because I want to have some users see their suggestions come into fruition first, because the tank combat might take a while. I know the most recent patch took a long time, and I'm sorry for that because of real life problems. But the tank combat thing is going to be a very big rework, I think, so that might take a while. So I would put that after the other stuff.
Do you generally just wish to be the sole developer for the mod, or are you sometimes thinking of getting additional help, since the players have no doubt noticed you're already hard working at your stuff and take time with dealing with Spirit spaghetti code?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say spaghetti code. It's not really code, but it's like I would like help, but the nature of the development means I cannot get help because you cannot have more than one guy working on the mod at the same time because of this really weird GUID system. So GUID being globally unique identifier, and you have to have one of these on all of your files. Whenever you change anything in the mod tools, you add an identifier. So you cannot have two people work at the same time without some kind of external thing that handles this. And you would have to code it yourself because nobody has done this before. And as a result, I cannot help but be the sole developer. And I understand why Acronos was also the sole developer. I can always use help in the graphics department, so portraits and unit icons. That would be very helpful if the need for that arises. But other than that, playing it and giving me feedback and testing it and having suggestions, there's really not a whole lot that players can do. So it's if you can give me graphics, yes, and otherwise, no.
What is your vision of the Spearhead mod and what you want it to eventually become at the end?
I want the Spearhead to eventually be a very well balanced mod. I want it to be that anyone can pick anything and have roughly equal chance of success given equal skill. That is something I do want. And that's the eventual outcome. I want to have a very well balanced mod with potentially some new units here and there if they fit into the balance. I don't want to add anything that doesn't fit. Like if people want to have a mouse in the game and I can't balance it. I mean, we don't have a model for that anyway. But if you can't balance it, it can't go in because it needs to fit into the balance somehow. Otherwise, you have things like Age of Empires 2 Sicilian Lancers thing where these start off as really, really OP, and that's not what I want.
How do you feel about the community that plays the mod and that you're still updating and keeping it more balanced for the players? How things become better and had the community help you apart from bug finding?
I greatly appreciate the fact that the community still plays, and I appreciate it when people talk to me about it because it's fun. It's a nice mod. I enjoy it, which is why I agreed to continue development. So as long as people are playing it, as long as people are enjoying the mod, then I can continue developing. If people stop enjoying it, then that's partly my responsibility, and also partly, it's sad. So it's like as long as it's player enjoyment definitely helps. And aside from bug finding, well, there's really not a whole lot the community can help you with other than just keep playing it. You keep playing it, keep enjoying the game, and I will be happy to develop.
Next question is from Bones. Are there any plan for major additional content additions, whole new major units and mechanics, or will future development largely be focused around balancing and minor additions like new or altered weapon upgrades, minor new units?
Well, bones. I think that the next patch, which again I've mentioned before, I'm rolling some stuff I was planning for 1.1 into 1.0.1. But for example, in terms of giant mechanics, the whole new viable vet thing for Axis is probably news, and it has new graphics and new building. Well, not really new building, but you have a new building buildable for Axis, and so it's going to be a mix of both balancing and some major mechanical changes. So it's not just this. They feel the armor rework will be a big rework, I think. Players might not notice it too much in terms of how it will feel, but you will definitely feel it when it comes to how the flow is. Like, yeah, the minor things maybe not, but flow yes. And in terms of major new units, the problem with that is only like I can only do so much with the tools that I have. Like Spearhead tools do not allow me to add new tanks without doing weird things like in Wikinger, where you have to have everyone play the same skin pack or things like that. So I don't know how that will work. Like if I could, if someday they release the model tools and I can add some new tanks, then yeah, sure. Like maybe for Soviet tank, I'd add an IS-1 with that, or add a KV-85. Things that are, it'd be interesting at new models. But aside from doing weird things, minor new units, as you say, it's difficult because there's only so much you can do with the tools that I have. But I do plan for new major content additions if I can do it.
All right. Next question from Erica. Is there any chance for more unique mechanics to be present in Spearhead? For example, V1 rockets, Goliaths having limited range, recovery tanks?
Um, I don't know if I can make it possible based on the limited tools that I have. Again, like unique mechanics. I know Vikinger has some, and they do it through some very specific ways, through very specific means. But I'll try. I'd like to add some new mechanics. Like one thing I've been personally toying with is the idea of potentially adding like medics, for example, actual medics that go around collecting dead bodies or whatever. These are some ideas. I don't know how possible it is. It's all in the realm of what is possible, what is not. So let's see. If it is possible, then maybe. If it's not, well, obviously it's not. So we'll have to wait and see.
All right. Next
What
question
Erica
from
mentioned are in Wikinger. Well, some things that I don't want, like Goliath having limited range. Like I don't want things that are not discoverable. Other things like recovery tanks. Okay, maybe. Anyway, yeah, continue.
Next question from Pi. What's the actual difference between the experience, such as civilian, poor, mixed, and so on? What's the percentage from one to another, or how does it actually make a difference in game?
So these are actually some big differences per faction. So each faction has their own set of experience levels. Soviets have the worst. Wehrmacht, SS, and British have the best, and USF sits kind of somewhere in the middle. So take for example conscripts. They are Soviet poor. Soviet poor have a minus 5% accuracy debuff and a plus I think 15% uh, increased received accuracy. So Soviet poors are easier to kill, and so are Americans. So let me pull up the stats actually. For rear echelons, as an example, rear echelons have poor modifiers, and so they get minus 5% accuracy on their gun. They don't have received accuracy buffs or debuffs, and they have a plus 33% received suppression. So they are worse at accuracy and they're worse at receiving suppression. Soviet conscripts, on the other hand, they get minus 5% accuracy, plus 10% received accuracy, plus 33% received suppression. So they're worse than USF. And Germans, like if we take, actually I don't think let's say Osttruppen, for example. Osttruppen units, they get no buffs or debuffs to accuracy, no buffs or debuffs to receive accuracy, and plus 33% suppression. So they have the baseline statistics, 100% for accuracy and receive accuracy for Osttruppen. And the same thing applies to Straff. Straff have the same stats as Osttruppen. The only difference is that Straff get an MP40 and Osttruppen don't. And these are the poor stats as an example. And as you go up in tiers, you get better stats naturally. So let's talk about well, civilian is something I made up recently for explicitly for Folksturm and for future like partisans, so actual civilians. But let's take a look at, for example, experienced troops, Sturmgrenadiers. Sturmgrenadiers get a baseline plus 20% accuracy, minus 10% received accuracy, and a minus 5% cooldown. So they fire faster than regular units, and they're more accurate, and they have a little bit received accuracy buff. So they're just better. They're better. And if it take, for example, a regular squad, so look at the Wallonians, for example. Let's see if I can find it in here. Right here, Walloons. Wallonians, they get plus 15% accuracy, minus 5% received accuracy, and that's it. So as you can see, the difference between Wallonians and Sturmgrenadiers are not that big, which is why a lot of people opt to go for Sturmgrenadiers. A lot of people opt to go for the Wallonians. This is something that's been in the game since forever, so I have no plans of changing this in particular. But it's good to know. It's very important to note that the accuracy buffs do get pretty insane once you get to elite. So again, another example, elite infantry. Stosstruppen for SS. They have elite skill. So they get plus 25% accuracy, minus 20% received accuracy, and minus 10% cooldown. So they fire even faster, are even more accurate, and are even harder to kill than Sturmgrenadiers. And this is kind of how it goes for Axis in general. And all factions are like this. But the bonuses are worse for USF and worse still for Soviets. That's how these stats work.
All right. Then for the last question from Valhallan 597. The new Tiger race that is supposed to be coming back is a great relief, but I am wondering, what will it be kited out with? The old prey deletion abilities, or perhaps new ones? Will the tank shock, an ability removed from the mod, make a unique appearance, or will the slot be reserved for another ability entirely?
Tank shock is something I removed because it has no counter. You can't really counter unless you have an officer with a stop retreat ability close by, and that is a very tall order if you're in a tense combat situation. So if you're all sitting there, not really doing a whole lot, and you have officers hanging around, that you could bust up the stop retreat ability and counter tank shock that way. It's possible, but it's very unlikely that is the case. So I did remove the ability. Will I make a unique appearance? I don't want to add it back because of the aforementioned uncounterable nature of tank shock. I don't want to add it because you can't counter it. So it's going to have all the pre-deletion abilities because, again, I didn't delete it on accident. I didn't delete it on purpose. I deleted it on accident. So I'm not sure what I would put in the ability's place. Tiger Ace does need to be unique. It does have already better stats than the standard Tiger, but I would take suggestions on what would fit into that spot. because it should be strong, it should be powerful, it should be scary. And that's all I have to say about that. Robertos?
Ooh, okay. So I had cut the microphone, sorry. So that's it for the Q&A. Thank you, everyone. And if you have additional questions, you can go ahead, is what I said.
Floor is open.
E.
Okay, you're not trolling me now. Okay. I'll be here for until let's say 15 minutes for any other questions. Then it's back to business as usual.
Business of sleeping.
Business? It's fucking late.
I have things to do,
Oh. Marshall.
like work.
Questions. What can I ask? Hums. How many hums? Hum dum dums. When
Ask
will
about
the
the blue
Luftpile
division.
get receive their STG model again?
Never.
Please. Oh.
No, MFS, you can unmute yourself. Oh no, server mute. Oh,
Wait. Oh, yes,
Yeah.
wait. Wait.
oh yeah. I see Bones' question. I'll address that after this. So the officer rework is part of the. Oh yeah, that was part of the officer rework because all the officer abilities, like the bombing runs, yeah, like a lot of people, well, notably Nikolai, has made a lot of complaints about the extreme speed at which the IL-2 shows up. And I used it against MFS against you today just to see how fast it was, and it really is pretty fast. Like you can't counter it. You can sprint out of the way and you'll still get hit. That's how fast it is. So yeah, it probably needs a cost increase and an increase in delay, but it's just part of the way that skill planes work in general. You can call them from the side of the map, and it's like I don't know how I'm gonna change this. Maybe I'll make it so it always flies from the HQ instead of flying from the side of the map. Maybe I'll do something else. I don't know yet, but definitely they do need to be nerfed in delay time or in cost or whatever. So I'll figure out a way to nerf it. But officer we work first, and then we figure out how to best adjust the abilities so that they are more counterable or have drawbacks. And to address Bones' question, are there plans to reduce the versatility of USF Rangers? Yes, there are definitely plans to reduce it. I plan to make it so that Rangers do not have as strong a late game as they do now. Because right now, if you are Rangers, you just sit there, you wait until you get jumbos and long toms, and you shell the shit out of your enemy, and boom, GG, you win. And that's not that's against goes against the spirit of the game. You should have to make hard decisions. So long tom nerf is first things first, which would greatly reduce their late game performance. And if that doesn't reduce their late game performance enough, then I would just move that unit to another doctrine that sorely needs it in terms of late game anti emplacement, and make it so the Rangers have to rely on satchels or whatever. And are there any plans to buff USF Armored? All the tank doctrines in the game, I plan to have unique ways of having them be played. So right now, tank doctrines in general are just your regular non-doc, but tanks with tanks, and it's like it's kind of boring because you just have tanks in addition to your infantry. So what I want to do is you want to have it so that when you're playing tank, you should be building tanks. You should be building the crappy tanks too. Maybe not if you're SS or Wehrmacht, they will have unique mechanics there as well. But as Soviets and Americans, you should be spamming the shit out of tanks. You should be building just the cheap tanks. You have a strong incentive to build the cheap tanks. So probably going to have increasingly effective cost decreases for USF tanks and Soviet tanks in general. so that you are incentivized to build more of them. You want to build so many crappy tanks that you can overwhelm your opponent with just crappy tanks. And that's kind of like a unique sort of ability to play them. But as a drawback, you won't have the default cost decreases or whatever else. So they're always going to be some kind of, you know, monkey's paw punishment for any buffs. And the last question that you asked, are the plans to make the Jackson require not so much tech? I could make it be unlocked with just a major, since it is more like a T-3485 or a Firefly. It really is just a Firefly with an instant gunner killed critical. So I might just remove the heavy tank unlock and see how its performance increases from there. But that would be for the future buff patch.
All right, I'm here. I'm gonna ask something. Would the blue division actually be a thing?
Um,
Seeing that I just figured out that they exist.
um, I don't know. I don't know where they'd fit.
Yeah,
If you want, I put a suggestion in a while ago about it, but we had a massive discussion about it a while ago, and it's basically technically they are in the game since they are considered a detachment of the Waterloo.
Hmm.
Or yes, they're basically part of the Belgians.
wait, they're SS?
They were given to an SS division at a certain
Mm.
time, and then they was sent to help the Belgians. I'm blissfully fucked, so I can't really speak that much, but yeah. So they're technically already in the game. They're just not named.
Uh, I will address this as part of the suggestion. I'll consider this a suggestion because I don't have enough knowledge on the blue division to make a comment on that right now. So I have to wait and see on that.
All right, I eat myself out now.
I've got a question too.
Yes.
In which US doctrine would you imagine the fifth US division, the diamond guys that are usable by AIs but not buildable?
I think they were part of mech before.
Yes, it is a mech unit.
Or is it armored?
No, it was mech.
It was
They
mech.
they
Okay.
pop with mech AIs.
Oh, okay. They pop with mech AI.
Like
Well,
there's a script.
mech are already really powerful right now, so I don't know if I want to add it back. Maybe I fold them into a battle group, but uh, I would have to figure out what niche they would play, like what role would they serve as part of a doctrine. Because if I just add them randomly, it's just a buff, and I don't want to straight buff these doctrines. They may make an appearance though, and they're already in game, so might as well use them. But I don't know where they go yet because you have to think about it.
Okay.
Can I also ask something?
Of course.
I wanted to ask, with all this discussion of adding new units, does this mean new infantry units are actually a possibility?
Yes. Of course, there is a limitation that we will only get to use models already in game. So I know we can found some suspicious-looking models, but if they're the new models, then yeah, they can be new units. But until we get those special tools that we need to include models designed by people who are skilled with Blender or whatever, we're gonna have to stick with the default models, which is kind of sad. You can only get new portraits. You get new portraits, but you have to have regular models. Just use your imagination. Yeah, you can use your imagination and be like, I can imagine these guys have hats. Anything else?
Do you intend to redo a bit the localization to make it actually true? Like, for example, where you change the equipment? Because I doubt I saw the good lines.
Oh yes, yes.
Was the
So
Volshumit that's been done, I'm sure of that, but not for the rear echelons.
yeah. Those are bugs. I need to fix those. Yeah, portraits are cool. I agree. Like having nice portraits. Like I know that some of the portraits in the game are like former developers, which is kind of neat. I'm definitely not going to add myself to any of these things because I don't want to do that. But like if it's a potential thing, you can add like portraits of people, of famous people. Like I don't know, have Abraham Lincoln or something. I don't know.
There is already a lot of unused portraits.
Are there?
Yes, there is a lot of portraits that are not in game at all.
Huh. Well, those could be used potentially. Could look into it. Oh, that's right. I know what you're talking about. Okay, yeah, potentially. I can add new portraits, like straight up, just add new portraits. That's easily done. Like that's not a problem. It's just the models that is a problem.
Who zooms enough to see the models? To be honest.
Even I do that sometimes. I zoom in real close. The only thing I don't do is I don't read the text, unfortunately, because I don't often have time to do that. If I have some spare time in the battle, then I can read the text. But more often than not, I don't have time to read it. So. Anything else?
Yes. Soviet tank commander, but female. When?
There's no model.
Damn.
I mean, there is.
I don't think there's a model.
There is models.
There is no
There
portrait,
is
but there is sometimes you can hear the voice lines like females.
Yeah, but I don't think I've never seen a model, neither in vanilla or in Spearhead.
Yeah, like, you can hear the voice. Like the voice line is easy. You can set it to whatever percentage chance you want. That's not the hard part. The hard part is like, is there a female tank model?
Well, there is only female medics models, if I'm not mistaken.
This is true.
No, they're partisan models, but it'd be very weird if you drive a T-3485 tank commander into battle and poof, there's a partisan at the top. It's like,
I mean, make it the female sniper. Because I don't think that's being used at the moment for any model.
Oh yeah, Anya, whatever her name is. Yeah, potentially.
There's Anya, then there's the actual female sniper because base games.
Oh, her. Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Maybe. That'd be interesting.
May I have one question?
Shoot.
Is there any... Do you plan of buffing the purging in any way?
Originally, I did because everyone complains about how bad it is. I had Ralph and I think someone else, I think Aldog, I had them play with it. And I had them test it and try it. And as it turns out, it's actually not so bad. The expectations are what makes it seem bad. Like a lot of people think that it's a terrible tank, but in actuality, it's almost the same as a Tiger.
But it's way more expensive, isn't it? Isn't it like 240 fuel?
No, it's 225, I think. Let me take a look. AEF vehicles Pershing. It costs 740 manpower and 225 fuel. And meanwhile, the German Tiger
740, 210, I think.
740, 210. Oh, actually, it does cost a little more. You're right. I was thinking of the. What was I thinking of? Panther? No, it costs more than Panther. Actually, maybe it could use a cost reduction then. It could be a little cheaper than the Tiger, but not by very much because statistically they're very close. In fact, I think the Pershing is better because it's armor. It has 100 more armor than a Tiger, so it is better. Its main gun is a little worse though. if I ever had the opportunity to import models at all,
Yo,
which I don't think I will. Yes.
when am I gonna get the relic employee role? Come on,
Ugh,
come on, memes, meme pie, me
Yeah.
want,
God damn it.
me,
Ah.
we want.
Can't you get a gremlin roll instead?
Oh, yeah. I read. Actually, no.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
that
should
one.
get it as well after yesterday, but still.
Maybe.
Played by Weekend.
Believe.
Bullied by Eugene.
Does that role still exist?
Eugen. No, I got rid of it.
Damn it.
Sadly not.
If you get at the top of Bush League, you'll get the Relic employee title.
Oh, fuck you,
Fuck, so I actually
Fuck
have to
you.
do ranked.
Erica. It's time to cough him out. Come on.
Well, we still need Luke.
Shut.
Yes, Luke is working.
Okay, I think that's about wraps it up for this Q&A session. I think everyone can either move back to general now or just relax.